The doorman at the Grand Hotel gave me a warm, familiar smile, waving me past the velvet rope without a glance at an invitation. He knew me, of course. I was Mrs. Julian Croft, the silent partner in the very company being honored this evening. His respectful gesture felt normal, even expected. For 15 years, I had been the driving force behind Julian's rise, the unseen partner who pored over legal documents late into the night and hosted intimate dinners with clients that secured 9-figure contracts. But this evening was supposed to be different. This was meant to be our triumph. The grand ballroom was a sea of crystal and gold, teeming with the most powerful figures in the city. I saw the mayor conversing with a banking magnate by the bar, while a huddle of tech entrepreneurs debated market futures near the lavish buffet. This was more than just another industry event. It was the night Julian would be officially anointed into the elite billionaires' circle. Before this story goes any further, I just want to say thank you for being here, listening to tales of women finding their strength. If you believe that every woman's voice deserves to be heard, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe. It costs nothing, but it helps us empower more people who need these stories. All right, let's get back to what unfolded. I adjusted the drape of my sapphire silk gown, the one Julian had picked out for me just last week. "Blue brings out the depth in your eyes," he'd murmured, planting a distracted kiss on my hair, a gesture that had lately become his trademark. At 54, I was still a woman who drew looks, having maintained the same slender frame that had first captivated him 25 years ago when I was a junior associate at his law firm and he was a hungry young lawyer with monumental ambitions. Eleanor, darling. It was Diana Hemmings, the senator's wife, who greeted me with 2 air kisses that barely grazed my cheeks. Julian must be absolutely ecstatic tonight. What a milestone. He's worked tirelessly for this, I answered, my eyes sweeping the room for my husband's well-known silhouette. We both have. Diana's smile faltered for the briefest of moments before snapping back to its full, practiced brilliance. Of course, my dear. You have always been so dedicated. There was an inflection in her voice that gave me pause, but she had already drifted away to greet another guest before I could dissect it. I tried to dismiss the unsettling feeling as I navigated the glittering crowd, graciously accepting congratulations and exchanging pleasantries with people I'd known for what felt like a lifetime. Yet, as I ventured further into the heart of the celebration, I started to sense a shift in the atmosphere. Conversations would halt the moment I came near. Significant looks were traded over the rims of champagne glasses. The smiles directed at me seemed strained, laced with a strange sort of pity. By the cascading chocolate fountain, I caught a snippet of conversation from Brenda Miller, a woman from our country club, whispering to her husband, "I just feel terrible for her. She's the only one who doesn't know." They saw me approaching, and the subject instantly pivoted to the unseasonably warm weather. The knot of dread in my gut cinched tighter. I finally located Julian near the stage, encircled by his usual assembly of senior executives and key investors. He looked breathtaking in his custom-made tuxedo, his silver-streaked hair styled to perfection, holding court with the easy charisma that had first drawn me in. This was his pinnacle, his moment to be celebrated, and all I wanted was to be there at his side, sharing in the victory. But as I drew closer, something peculiar occurred. The group of men seemed to instinctively tighten their circle, their bodies angling slightly away from me, forming a subtle wall. Julian carried on with his passionate monologue about international markets, utterly oblivious to my approach. "Julian," I said, my voice soft as I gently touched his arm. He spun around, and for a fleeting instant I saw an emotion flash in his eyes. It wasn't delight or affection or even simple acknowledgement. It was irritation. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the polite, detached smile he reserved for overly persistent vendors. "Oh, Eleanor, you made it." His voice was toneless, dismissive. There was no kiss, no arm sliding around my waist, no move to introduce me to the foreign dignitaries he had been wooing for the better part of a year. "Of course I made it," I replied with a light laugh, trying to mask the sting. "It's our big night, isn't it?" One of the men coughed uncomfortably and made an excuse to leave. Another glanced at his watch and mumbled something about needing to find his wife. In a matter of seconds, the powerful circle had dissolved, leaving Julian and me standing awkwardly alone. "I really should get back to schmoozing," Julian said, his gaze already sweeping the room for his next target. "These partnerships won't forge themselves." He strode away without so much as a backward glance, leaving me standing by the stage like a forgotten coat. The rejection was a sharp, hot burn, but what was worse was the dawning certainty that everyone was watching, whispering, passing judgment. That's when I heard it, the words slicing through the party's murmur with perfect, chilling clarity. "There's the Ice Queen who can't keep him interested." The voice came from somewhere behind me, pitched just high enough for me to hear. I turned, my cheeks flushing with a wave of humiliation, but I couldn't pinpoint the speaker in the blur of faces. "Poor woman," a second voice chimed in. "She has no clue about Chloe." Chloe, Julian's new executive assistant, the 20-something with a model's figure and a shark's ambition who had joined the company half a year ago. The one who was always there for the late-night sessions and weekend strategy meetings, who had started accompanying Julian on his business trips, who was constantly leaning in to whisper some confidential matter in his ear. My hands started to tremble as the pieces of a puzzle I had willfully ignored began to crash into place. The late-night meetings that stretched past 2 a.m., the business trips from which I was suddenly, politely excluded. The way Julian's entire demeanor brightened whenever his phone buzzed with what he always dismissed as urgent work texts. "Eleanor, honey." The voice was Chloe's. She had materialized next to me, poured into a crimson gown that cost more than my first car. Her smile was a weapon. "Hello, Chloe," I managed to say, my own voice alarmingly fragile. She leaned in, her cloying perfume making me feel ill. "I think there might have been a small mix-up tonight. This event is really meant for key partners and major investors." "I am a major investor," I shot back, a spark of my old fire returning. "I own 22% of this company." "Owned," she corrected me, her tone dripping with false pity. "Past tense, darling. It's something Julian has been meaning to talk to you about." As the security guards firmly but gently guided me towards the exit, I felt the foundation of my life, my marriage, my identity, my future, crack and shatter into a million irreparable pieces. The hotel's revolving door pushed me out onto the street with a finality that resonated deep in my soul. Every step down the grand marble staircase was like walking away from a funeral, not just of my marriage, but of the woman I had been for over 2 decades. The valet who had greeted me so warmly just an hour before now studiously avoided my gaze, his attention suddenly consumed by his clipboard. The sharp click of my heels on the pavement was a frantic counterpoint to my thudding heart. The city buzzed with its usual Friday night energy around me, couples laughing on their way to dinner, friends celebrating the end of the week, but their happiness felt a world away. Tucked inside my clutch, next to my lipstick and keys, was the small velvet-covered box I had been planning to give Julian tonight. I pulled it out, my thumb tracing the soft fabric. Inside was a vintage watch, its back engraved with a set of coordinates, the location of the tiny, run-down office where he had signed his first business lease 25 years ago. I had spent months finding it, intending it as a surprise after his speech. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. "Excuse me, are you okay?" A young woman in a catering uniform was on her smoke break by the service entrance. Her question held a note of genuine concern, a stark contrast to the hollow sympathy I had faced inside. "Just getting some fresh air," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. She nodded and lit her cigarette, but I could feel her eyes on me. Did I look as shattered as I felt? I pulled my shoulders back and walked toward the parking structure, each step forging something new inside me. It wasn't just sorrow, it was something colder, harder. My sedan was right where I'd left it, its dark paint gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. I slid behind the wheel but didn't turn on the engine. I just sat in the echoing silence, finally letting my thoughts clear for the first time in what felt like forever. The clues had been there all along. Julian's newfound obsession with the gym, his sudden switch from glasses to contact lenses, the unexplained charges on our credit card statements for restaurants I'd never heard of, the way he'd started heading straight for the shower the moment he got home from work, scrubbing away evidence I had been too naive to look for. But it wasn't just the affair that cut so deeply. It was the complete and total erasure of my role in our shared success. Every magazine feature called it Croft Dynamics, hailing Julian as the sole visionary founder. There was never any mention of the woman who had liquidated her inheritance to secure his initial funding. No credit for the invaluable connections I'd provided through my family's legal practice. No acknowledgement of the thousands of hours I'd spent poring over contracts while he slept. I took out my phone and went to my contacts. My thumb hovered over Julian's name before I scrolled down to Mark O'Connell, financial advisor. Eleanor? It's almost 11. Is everything all right? Mark, I need you to initiate several transactions first thing on Monday. Can you get into my personal portfolio now? Of course, but what's happened? We just went over everything last month. I want to liquidate my entire stake in Croft Dynamics, all $22 million of it. The silence on the other end of the line was so profound, I thought he might have hung up. Eleanor, that's a monumental move. Shouldn't we book a meeting to go over the implications? Monday morning, Mark. I also need you to freeze every joint account and credit card. Anything with my name and Julian's on it gets locked down now. Are you two getting a divorce? The question lingered in the charged silence. Was I? An hour ago, the thought would have been absurd. Now the word felt like the only path forward. Just get it done, Mark. I'll be in touch tomorrow with further instructions. My next call was to our travel agent. Brenda answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. Brenda, it's Eleanor Croft. I need to cancel our safari to Kenya next month. Oh dear, is something wrong? That was such a special anniversary trip you and Julian had planned. An anniversary trip. 25 years of marriage, and I had no doubt he'd planned to spend it with Chloe while I sat at home, oblivious. Plans changed. Cancel it all. The luxury lodge, the private guides, the flights, every single thing. Eleanor, the cancellation penalties will be enormous. Are you certain you don't want to sleep on it? I'm absolutely certain. Email me the confirmation. My phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Croft, this is Ben from Hotel Security. You left a gift box on the steps out front. Do you want me to bring it down to your car? I looked at my empty hands. I dropped the watch somewhere between the grand entrance and the garage. The engraved coordinates of our beginning, lost on the cold concrete just like everything else we had supposedly built. Keep it, I texted back, or throw it out. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. That was the whole problem. 25 years of mattering, of prioritizing his ambitions over my own, of playing the role of the impeccable corporate spouse while he constructed an empire on the foundation of my sacrifices. My devotion had become a gilded cage, and tonight Chloe had unwittingly handed me the key. My phone screen flashed to life with an incoming call. Julian's face from a photo I took last Christmas as he laughed at something our son said. He looked genuinely happy in that picture, before Chloe, before all of this. I hit decline. It immediately rang again, and again. By the fourth call, I had started the car and was pulling out of the garage. Let him wonder. Let him try to explain to his new partner why his wife had just vanished without a trace. The drive home took me through the city's financial heart where our journey had begun. Julian's first real office was in a building that now housed a coffee shop, but I could still hear the raw excitement in his voice when he'd called to tell me he'd secured the lease. We're going to do it, Ellie. You and me. We're going to build something that lasts. We had built something. But somewhere on the journey, we had become he, and I had let it happen. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the seat next to me. Call after call from Julian, punctuated by texts that were growing more and more frantic. I didn't need to look at them to know their content. Confusion, anger, demands. By the time I glided into our sweeping driveway, the missed call log was at 37. I killed the engine and sat in the quiet of our 4-car garage, surrounded by the trappings of a life I no longer wanted. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of taking it all apart. Tonight, I would sleep in our bed one last time as Mrs. Julian Croft. The woman who had entered that party was a naive fool. The woman sitting in this car was someone else entirely. I was awake at 5:30 a.m., just as I had been every morning for the past 20 years. The empty expanse of our California king bed felt cavernous. Even though Julian never got up before 7, his absence today felt different. It felt final. I brewed coffee in the sterile silence of our designer kitchen, the whir of the grinder, the only sound in the house. My home office looked the same, but as I sat down at the enormous mahogany desk Julian had bought me for our 15th anniversary, the entire room felt charged with new purpose. The filing cabinets that lined one wall held 25 years of my life's work, documented with the kind of precision that had once been a source of pride for Julian's business partners. Now, that same meticulous paperwork would serve to dismantle his world. I pulled the first folder, labeled Croft Dynamics, Incorporation, 1998. My signature was right there next to Julian's, clear as day, listing me as a co-founder and the primary initial investor. It was funny how easily corporate PR could rewrite history. I photographed every single page with my phone, creating an unassailable digital record. The next file contained the loan agreements from 2003, when Julian needed a massive capital injection to expand. My family's legal network had opened the doors, but it was my name signed as the guarantor on the $5 million loan. My personal wealth had been the collateral, not his. Another photo, another piece of the truth. By 8 o'clock, I had documented over a decade and a half of financial contributions, a story that Julian's official company, Biography, had conveniently erased. The inheritance from my grandfather that financed his first major acquisition, the second mortgage I'd taken out on our home to make payroll during the 2008 financial crisis, the countless client introductions from my personal network that had been the bedrock of his empire. My phone rang. Mark O'Connell's name lit up the screen. "Eleanor, I've been trying to reach you. The market's open in 30 minutes. I need your final verbal authorization for these liquidations. You have it. Execute every trade we talked about. The Croft Dynamics stock is already down 3 points in pre-market trading. News is leaking about a major shareholder offloading. Are you 100% on this? Mark, I've never been more sure of anything. I'll make it happen. You'll have confirmation within the hour." I hung up and turned to my laptop. The legal notification I had drafted in the dead of night stared back at me, its language cold and exact. No emotion, no recriminations, just facts. Eleanor Grace Vance hereby informs the Board of Directors of Croft Dynamics of the immediate and complete liquidation of her 22% ownership stake and the termination of all shared financial instruments. My finger paused over the send key for a heartbeat, then I clicked. The email shot into the ether, carrying with it the demolition of the world Julian thought he had built. Less than a minute later, my phone began to detonate. Julian's name flashed, but I ignored it. It rang again and again. By the fourth call, I was almost starting to enjoy the brief moments of silence in between. Each unanswered ring was a small act of reclaiming myself. The texts followed. "Eleanor, what in God's name have you done? Call me this instant. Delete. This is certifiably insane. You don't get to destroy everything we built just because you're having some sort of midlife crisis. Delete. The board is calling an emergency meeting. You've created a full-blown corporate meltdown. Call me. Now. Delete." I poured a second coffee and went back to the files. The partnership agreements Julian had pushed to renegotiate 6 years ago now looked sinister under this new light. He'd been laying the groundwork for this for years, systematically diminishing my official role while keeping me financially entangled. But he had made one critical error. He never had my name struck from the original articles of incorporation. Legally, I was still a founding partner, with all the rights and access that entailed. A text from an unknown number buzzed on the desk. "Mrs. Croft, this is Chloe. I hope you're feeling more yourself this morning. I thought perhaps we could get coffee and clear the air about last night." I stared at the message, the sheer audacity of it leaving me breathless. The woman who had orchestrated my public humiliation was now acting as if we were friends who had a simple tiff. I typed a reply. There was nothing to clear up, and my name is Miss Vance. I'm reverting to my maiden name. Her response was instantaneous. "Let's not be rash. Julian is deeply distressed. I'm sure we can find a solution that works for everyone. As if I were a logistical problem to be managed, not a human being who had been systematically betrayed." I screenshotted her message and filed it away with the rest of my evidence. The house landline rang, a number so rarely used it could only be one of two people. "Eleanor Grace, what on earth is happening?" My sister Catherine's voice was sharp with alarm. "Julian just called me hysterical, saying you've completely lost your grip on reality." I found it, actually. For the first time in a very long time. He says you're trying to ruin his company out of spite, that you're having some kind of nervous breakdown and making reckless choices you'll live to regret. I walked to the window that overlooked the gardens, which Julian had never once offered to help me tend. The hydrangeas were in full, glorious bloom, nurtured by hands he never seemed to notice were perpetually smudged with dirt. "Catherine, did you know I have personally invested over $30 million into Julian's success? And that's not counting my time, my legal expertise, or my network. Well, that's what a marriage is. A partnership. Did you know he's sleeping with his assistant? That she had me physically removed from our own company party last night in front of hundreds of people?" The line went dead silent. "I'm not having a breakdown, Catherine. I'm having a breakthrough. And there is a world of difference between the two." When I hung up, a profound sense of peace settled over the house. I went back to my desk and opened a new file. If Julian wanted to cast himself as the victim, he was going to have to explain away 25 years of financial records that told a very different story. My phone now showed 62 missed calls, but the incessant buzzing had faded into background noise. With each ignored ring, I felt like I was shedding another layer of a life that had been slowly suffocating me. The woman who had fled that party in disgrace was gone. In her place sat a woman Julian had never truly met, a woman who knew her exact value and was finally ready to collect. The Croft Dynamics boardroom was designed to intimidate, with its panoramic city views and a massive, imposing conference table. Today, however, I felt perfectly at ease in the plush leather chair I had occupied in countless meetings over the years. I'd shown up 30 minutes before the scheduled time, arranging my documents on the polished wood like a general laying out battle plans. The other board members filed in one by one, their faces a mixture of anxiety and discomfort. Men I had known for over a decade now struggled to meet my gaze. Thomas Morrison, our long-serving CFO, gave me a brief, sympathetic nod before settling into his chair. Diana Webb, the head of our legal department, looked physically ill, no doubt already running the numbers on the legal fallout. Then Julian stormed through the doors. After 25 years of marriage, I was an expert at reading his moods, but I had never seen him like this. His normally immaculate silver hair was unkempt, his tie was askew, and deep, dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. The commanding aura that had always filled this room was gone, replaced by sheer panic. Chloe trailed in his wake, her bright red suit a jarring contrast to her ashen face. She took up a position against the wall, her arms crossed in a feeble attempt at defiance, her eyes darting between Julian and me like a trapped animal seeking an escape. "Eleanor." My name came out as a choked whisper. What have you done?" I leaned back, my hands folded calmly on my lap. "Good morning, Julian, gentleman, Diana. I appreciate you all making time for this. Don't you dare play games with me, Eleanor." He slammed his hand on the table, and several board members flinched. "You have detonated a financial bomb in this company. Our stock is in a nosedive, our clients are calling in a panic, and the banks are threatening to call in our loans because of the frozen accounts." Thomas Morrison cleared his throat. "Eleanor, perhaps we can find a way to make this a more orderly transition." "There's nothing to discuss, Thomas. I have liquidated my shares in full compliance with the corporate charter. Everything was executed by the book." Julian started to pace, a caged animal in a tailored suit. "You've stolen everything from me. 25 years of my life's work, demolished in a single morning because you're having some sort of emotional episode." The accusation hung in the silent room. I could feel the board members watching me, waiting for me to cry, to scream, to validate Julian's story that I was just an unstable, irrational woman. Instead, I opened my file and slid a document across the table. "This is the original incorporation filing from 1998, I said, my voice even and professional. "As you can all see, my name is listed as a co-founder and the principal investor. It's curious how that fact was omitted from the official company history." Julian froze. That was a mere formality. "And this is the personal loan guarantee I signed in 2003 when you needed $5 million to acquire a competitor. I placed a second document on top of the first. My inheritance secured that deal, Julian, not yours." Chloe, by the wall, had uncrossed her arms and was now listening with rapt attention. "And this," I continued, adding a thick binder to the pile, "is a complete accounting of every single dollar I have personally invested in Croft Dynamics over the last 2 decades. $31 million in direct capital, not including the value of my legal work, strategic planning, or the client relationships I brought to the table." The only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the ventilation system. Julian's face had drained of all color. "Eleanor," Diana Webb finally spoke, her voice cautious, "what is it that you are proposing?" "I'm not proposing a thing. I am informing you that as of this morning, I have no financial ties to Croft Dynamics. The company will need to undergo an immediate and radical restructuring if it hopes to survive. You can't just—" Julian began, but I cut him off. "I can't. I already have. What I helped build, I can help unbuild." For the first time, I turned my gaze directly to Chloe. The confident, smug woman from the party was gone. Her expensive makeup couldn't conceal the raw fear in her eyes as the reality of my actions sank in. "Of course," I added, my eyes still locked on hers. "The company might be salvageable under new leadership. Someone who isn't burdened by the baggage of a recent, very public scandal." Julian's head snapped toward his mistress, and a flicker of understanding finally crossed his face. "You're burning it all down just to get back at me for what, Julian? For the affair? For the public humiliation? For trying to write me out of my own life story?" I stood up and began gathering my papers. This isn't about revenge. It's just business. The atmosphere in the room had become glacial. Thomas Morrison was scribbling furiously, likely trying to figure out how to salvage his own position. Diana Webb looked as if she were already drafting her resignation. Julian sank into his chair, all the fight gone from him. "What do you want, Eleanor?" "I want what I was owed from the beginning, recognition for my work and respect for my intelligence. Since you proved incapable of providing either, I've decided to secure them for myself." "The board will never agree to this," he said, his voice weak. "The board has no choice. Unless you can magically produce $31 million by the end of the business day, Croft Dynamics will be bankrupt." I paused at the door. "My advice is to call an emergency shareholders meeting and discuss a change in leadership." As I turned the handle, Julian played his last desperate card. "I'm stepping down as CEO." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I heard several audible gasps. Chloe's face went completely white as she watched her entire future evaporate. I turned back to face him. For a split second, I saw the ambitious, brilliant, and ultimately broken man I had once loved. "That's a sensible choice, Julian. My lawyer will be serving you with divorce papers shortly. After you've managed to secure the company's future, we can begin to divide our personal assets." I walked out of that boardroom a completely different woman. Behind me, I could hear the eruption of frantic whispers and the scratching of Diana's pen as she began the monumental task of damage control. I heard Chloe's heels clicking rapidly on the floor as she rushed after Julian, no doubt already planning her own exit strategy. The elevator doors slid shut with a quiet chime, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. After 25 years of being the invisible woman, I had learned just how powerful it was to finally be seen. The elevator descended in total silence, carrying me away from a quarter-century of my life. When the doors opened into the parking garage, it felt like I was stepping into a new reality, one where I was the one writing the script. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the drive home, Julian's name flashing on the screen with a desperate, pathetic rhythm. By the time I reached my driveway, the missed call log showed 73 attempts. I powered the phone off and dropped it in my bag, savoring the quiet. Inside our house, my house, I corrected myself, everything looked the same but felt profoundly different. The gallery of wedding photos in the hallway seemed like relics from another person's life. The kitchen, where I had hosted so many dinners for Julian's associates, felt cavernous and cold. Even our bedroom, with its oversized bed and matching furniture, belonged to a couple I no longer knew. I went straight to my office and retrieved a manila folder I had assembled weeks ago, but hadn't found the courage to open. The divorce petition was crisp and official, each line of legal jargon a door swinging shut on the past. At the top of the first page, in bold letters, it read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage. Eleanor Grace Vance versus Julian Thomas Croft." My hand shook slightly as I signed the first line, Eleanor G. Vance. I had already initiated the legal process of reclaiming my maiden name, and seeing it in ink felt like shrugging on a coat that finally fit after years in a borrowed one. The second signature was easier. The third, easier still. By the final page, my hand was rock steady, my conviction absolute. I sealed the documents in the pre-addressed courier pack and set it by the door. Tomorrow, a process server would deliver it to Julian's office, formalizing our separation. As I put the envelope down, an unexpected feeling washed over me. Not anger or sadness, but an immense sense of relief. For the first time in decades, I wasn't mentally tracking Julian's schedule, planning his meals, or strategizing how to support his next venture. The vast mental real estate he had occupied was suddenly, completely my own. I slept more soundly that night than I had in years. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations and endless paperwork, but they were also filled with something I hadn't felt in a very long time, a genuine thrill for my own future. My lawyer, Sophia Rossi, became a trusted advisor and confidant as we wove through the intricacies of dissolving a multi-million-dollar marriage. "Your financial records are airtight," Sophia remarked during one of our meetings. "Most spouses can't document a tenth of what you've proven you contributed to the marital assets. I've always been a detailed person. It used to be one of Julian's pet peeves." Well, it's about to make you a very wealthy woman. His lawyers are trying to argue for a 50-50 split. But based on your investment history, you're entitled to a far larger share. In between sessions with Sophia, I began to rediscover pieces of myself I had long since buried. I signed up for a photography course, a passion I'd had in college but gave up when Julian had dismissed it as an impractical hobby. My instructor, a retired photojournalist named Elena, became an unlikely friend. "You have an incredible eye," she told me after seeing my first project. "You see the story behind the person." I had always seen the stories, in Julian's business negotiations, in the lives of his clients, in the complex dance of corporate events. but I had never imagined my perspective had any value outside of serving someone else's narrative. My sister, Catherine, came to visit one afternoon, her stated purpose to check on me, but her real one to satisfy her curiosity. "You look different," she observed, nursing a coffee in my kitchen with that familiar, judgmental air she had perfected over the years. "I feel different, lighter. Julian says you refuse to take his calls. He's worried." I met her gaze over the rim of my cup. "Catherine, when was the last time you and I had a conversation that didn't eventually circle back to Julian, his career, his needs, his problems?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, the realization dawning on her. "Exactly. Even now, your primary reason for being here is because of him, not because you wanted to see how your sister was doing." Her face flushed with indignation. "That's not true. It is entirely true. And it's not your fault. I spent 25 years training everyone, including myself, to see me as Julian's wife first and Eleanor second. That woman is gone. 3 months after the divorce was filed, I made my first major solo investment, a small, innovative tech startup run by 2 brilliant young women who reminded me of a younger, hungrier version of Julian and myself. "Why tech?" Sophia asked when I told her. "Because they're building something from the ground up with integrity, and because I want to prove to myself that I can spot potential and foster success without anyone's permission." The investment felt like a declaration of independence. My phone buzzed. It was Elena. "I've been looking at your latest portraits. They're stunning. The emotional depth is incredible." "Thank you. I'm just trying to live my own life now." Elena nodded, and I saw a flicker of empathy in her eyes. "I'm sorry for everything. I know it's not enough, but I am truly sorry. Thank you for that. I hope you find some peace, Julian." I walked past him and out the door, feeling his gaze on my back but not turning around. Outside, the air was cool with the promise of a new season. I had plans for dinner with Elena and her husband, and a weekend trip scheduled to photograph the desert landscapes, a life that was entirely beautifully my own. For the first time in 25 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The open road stretched out before me, a symbol of the future I was now creating for myself. My professional camera gear was secured in the passenger seat of my new car, a sleek electric vehicle in the exact shade of deep indigo I had always wanted, but Julian had considered too ostentatious. The morning sun bathed the coastline in a warm, golden glow as I headed toward my favorite spot, a remote bluff overlooking the ocean where I'd captured some of my most powerful images over the past year. A full 12 months had passed since that night at the gala, and the woman driving this car was a stranger to the one who had been so shamefully dismissed. My hair, now cut to my shoulders and threaded with the silver I no longer bothered to conceal, whipped in the breeze from the open sunroof. The designer uniform I had once worn to complement Julian's status had been replaced by comfortable jeans and a simple cashmere sweater I'd bought just because the color made me happy. My phone chimed with a text from Elena. "The gallery opens in 2 hours. I still can't believe they're giving you a solo feature with 8 pieces." The Meridian Gallery exhibition was the culmination of a year's hard work. My series of portraits, which captured women in the midst of profound life changes, had resonated with critics who praised their raw vulnerability and quiet power. The irony that my own transformation had become the source of my art was not lost on me. As I set up my tripod on the cliff edge, my hands moving with practiced confidence, I thought about the call I'd had with my financial advisor the day before. Vance Equity, the investment firm I had launched 6 months prior, had just closed its 3rd major deal. The tech startup was outperforming all expectations, and 2 other ventures I'd backed were on a similar trajectory. "You have an incredible knack for seeing what others miss," Sophia had told me during our last review. "These founders trust you because they know you get what it means to build something from nothing." The viewfinder framed a perfect scene. waves crashing on the rocks below, gulls soaring on the wind, and the endless horizon promising more to come. I adjusted my settings and captured the image, knowing it would be a contender for the cover of my upcoming book proposal. Resilience. Portraits of Reclaimed Selves had already drawn inquiries from 3 major publishing houses. As I was packing my gear, my phone rang. It was my sister, Catherine, and I answered with a warmth that felt genuine and easy. "Eleanor, just calling to wish you luck tonight. I know what this show means to you. Thank you. Are you still coming? I wouldn't miss it for the world. And Ellie." I wanted to apologize. You were right. I had gotten so used to seeing you as just an extension of Julian. Getting to know you again this past year, just as my sister, has been one of the best things in my life. After we hung up, I drove back toward the city, a lightness in my chest that had become my new normal. Vivaldi's 4 Seasons played on the radio, and I found myself humming along, something I would never have done with Julian in the car. He had always insisted on silence, claiming music was a distraction. The gallery was buzzing with energy when I arrived. My portraits dominated an entire wall, a series of black and white images that spoke of struggle, strength, and rediscovery. Each photo was the product of weeks spent building trust with women who had let me capture their most unguarded moments. "These are magnificent," the gallery owner, James, said as we made a final tweak to the lighting. "You haven't just captured their faces, you've captured their souls. It's truly powerful." The opening reception was packed. Collectors, critics, and art lovers moved through the space, their appreciative murmurs a pleasant hum. I navigated the crowd with a newfound confidence, speaking about my work with an authority I'd always possessed but had never been allowed to use. "Excuse me, are you the artist?" I turned to see a young woman, her eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and what I recognized as kinship. "I am. I'm Eleanor Vance." "Your work is incredible," she said, gesturing to a portrait of an older woman who was laughing through visible tears. "I'm going through a divorce myself, and seeing this, it gives me hope that there's still happiness on the other side." "There is," I promised her. "It might be a different kind of happiness, but it's real, and it's all yours." As the night went on, I engaged in conversations about everything from artistic theory to investment strategy. People wanted my opinion. They valued my perspective. The invisible woman who had once stood silently in her husband's shadow had been replaced by someone who commanded a room on her own terms. At the end of the night, Elena came over with a glass of champagne, a proud smile on her face. "3 red dots," she said, pointing to the small stickers that marked a sale, and I overheard 2 collectors talking about commissioning you for private work. I took the champagne and surveyed the room. My art was on the walls. My name was on the program. My success was my own. But more than that, for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely and utterly myself. Later that night, I sat in my home office, a space now decorated with my own photographs and filled with my own projects, sifting through emails from potential clients and publishers. The city sparkled outside my window, and I knew that somewhere out there, Julian was likely still working, still chasing a sense of validation he would never find. I closed my laptop and stepped out onto my balcony, breathing in the cool night air. The future was unwritten, full of new challenges and new opportunities to prove that a woman's value is not determined by her willingness to be erased. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from a blocked number. "Saw the news about your exhibition. Congratulations. You deserve every bit of your success. C." I read Chloe's message once, then a second time, before deleting it without a reply. Some doors are meant to stay closed forever. Standing there under the stars, I smiled. I had finally become the woman I was always meant to be, successful, independent, and completely, unequivocally free. If this story of reclaiming power had you cheering Eleanor on, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Eleanor calmly dismantled Julian's entire world in the boardroom with nothing but the truth. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.